And I want to thank all of you for coming to this meeting. We're really excited. We've been talking as a board about how to present some more educational lunch presentations, focusing in on what the business owner or the community member can do to help contribute to helping revitalize the community engagement required in a Main Street community. Suburban Main Street communities that were formed before there was a lot of other suburban sprawl that was existing, and how we can recreate the vitality that existed when Main Street was first formed. So what we can do so that we continue to remain vital. And Morristown, of course, has an amazing Main Street, and we can all be a part of helping recreate some energy, recreate some activity, and having Main Street become a community hub for all of Morristown, which can help result in more people visiting Morristown. It can result in the community staying in Morristown and having us be a more sustainable, smaller, stronger community of people. So thank you for being here. Before we get started, I just wanted to point out that your lunch that you're having today comes from Main Street. It was from Bacchio's, so thank you for being contributing. Pam Minetti also is the person who was really so kind to work with the board in creating the directory that just went out in the mail. So most of you should have received them in the mail if you're residents. If not, we have stacks somewhere here, actually, for you to grab with you. Candace also, from our board, was a critical, important part of creating the directory as quickly as it was created. It's, I think, a record breaker for us, right? Getting it out as fast as it did this year. So thanks to all of you. So I want to take a moment now to introduce you to my friend Karen Slorusto. Close? Close. I cannot do that one. She is the manager of the Office of Community and Economic Development at the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. MBA has been attending some of their educational meetings. We've been reading a lot of their research. They're a wonderful organization that creates a lot, collects data mostly about what you need to make it through the rising water table issue that's happening in the community, what you need to address transportation issues and transportation needs that they're monitoring and that just need to happen. How do you evolve? How do you shift? How do you respond to an aging community that wants to maybe stay in place, and what you need to do in your city plan in order to attract people to stay in place in their homes. So those are just some of the things that they have research on their website, and you can learn more about data specific to those topics. So the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission is the federally designated metropolitan planning organization for the greater Philadelphia region, and in New Jersey that includes Burlington, Camden, Gloucester, and Mercer counties. So we are definitely part of their focus. Their vision for the region is a prosperous, innovative, equitable, resilient, and sustainable region that increases mobility choices by investing in a safe and modern transportation system that promotes and preserves our natural resources while creating healthy communities. And that fosters greater opportunity for all people. As a city planner, Karen will be sharing information on the importance of main streets to suburban communities and what Main Street communities like ours need to be doing in order to remain vital and thriving into the future. So with that, you need copies of the presentation. They're back there. And Karen, you got the floor. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you once again to Diane and MBA for inviting me here to speak. This is my third time here in Morristown. I love this community. I am local to South Jersey, so anything I can do to help Morristown be successful, I'm game. So just a little bit about myself. I just want to expand on what Diane said. I am a professional planner here in the state of New Jersey. I'm also a nationally certified planner. I've been practicing community development now for about 19 years, which is scary. Oh my goodness, when I think about the math. So about 19 years I've been doing this, and I've been at DVRPC now for 17 of those years. So I feel fortunate that I've been part of that organization. We're a large organization. If you don't know who we are, just by show of hands, who knows what an MPO is? Okay. So let me just take a step back. The MPO, we essentially our main goal is to disseminate.
We can't hear you at all.
Okay. I'll talk louder. I'll try. Okay.
Like where Steve is. 5-acre seats. Maybe it's here.
Hold on, just give me a second. I'm just going to shift here. No. I'm restarting, by the way. I lost 3 minutes. Our primary goal as an MPO is to disseminate transportation dollars for the region. So when you see the roads being fixed, bridges being fixed, that all comes through our office in Philadelphia. Diane mentioned the 4 counties we have jurisdiction over in New Jersey, but we also do planning for 5 counties in Pennsylvania. That includes Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, and the city of Philadelphia. So we serve a very diverse region, 352 municipalities, and they're all in different life stages. But I hope the message I give you today is something that you find to be transferable to Morristown. So given the time, I have 4 main things that I want to hit on today. I want to talk to you about why downtown, why invest in your downtown. I'm going to touch on some retail trends that are happening nationally and locally. Talk about the retail mix. Talk about what a traditional Main Street downtown should look like in theory, and then what actually what happens on the street. And then finally, I want to highlight some characteristics for success that I found in my research. And that research pulls from the National Main Street, if you're all familiar with the National Main Street model, as well as firsthand information that I found over the past few years. And I believe we have time for questions afterwards. So if there's something that you'd like me to expand on, please add that to the questions that you had gone through. Okay, first, why downtown? Well, we all know why downtown because we work here, but let's not forget that downtown, it was here first. It's what people remember about your community. You know what? No, go ahead. I actually need slides. I can't see it. Okay. Oh, that helps. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. And you all have copies of this, and my apologies. But downtown, again, we bring tax revenue to the community. I know everyone talks about ratables in New Jersey, about how we need the next big box to come along that's going to save us from our enormous taxes. But downtown can serve that purpose as well. I just want to point that out. It's an employment generator. I think about when I was a teenager and I grew up in North Jersey in a community much like Morristown, and I was able to walk to work from my house at a local pharmacy. It was a great experience. And it's something that I think it's lost sometimes when people talk about ratables. But it definitely can serve to be a local employer. Access to goods and services. Downtown should be the go-to place for your Saturday errands. That's what it used to be, and that's what it still should be. And I think that gets forgotten sometimes when we're all thinking about development and moving out further, into our green spaces. And then finally, downtown's the gathering spaces. That's how they started. And that's where everyone sort of wants to be still. Morristown's very fortunate. It has an architecture and a character that is unfound in other communities, and it's a great building block. And it's something I think that the community should build upon even more. And it's a natural gathering place. Look at this building we're standing in. This library alone is impressive. So if you need more reasons why you should all invest in downtown, let me know. But I think those are 4 pretty good ones. I'm sorry, I can't see either. So retail trends. And I apologize. I usually do an hour presentation on this, and I had to cut some slides. So what you really need to do when you're thinking about downtown is understand the direction of where retail's going, understand and have a vision of your leaders here in the community, and understand your consumer needs. With those, I'm going to highlight 5 things that perhaps the Business Association as well as community leaders should think about. Who shops in the downtown? Think about who comes to your community. What you need to understand is who lives here, who shops here, and what they need. Understand the generational preferences. Understand the demographics that are going on. We all talk about millennials, and I don't like that word, to be honest with you. I prefer change makers. But I mean, it's a strong demographic group. But is that who's shopping here in Morristown? Probably not. Think about the baby boomers. Think about the older people aging. They have a lot of discretionary funds. They want to spend money. They want to go to dinner every night. What I'm trying to say is understand who lives here, who shops here, and what they need, and what they spend their money on. The second thing to think about is ethnic diversity, diversifying the businesses in your downtown. Is there a niche? And this goes in hand with understanding the demographic of your community. If you understand who lives here, you might understand, is there an ethnic class of people that maybe we're not serving, maybe the downtown could serve? Not here necessarily in Morristown, but if you're all familiar, and I know you are, Cherry Hill is doing a fantastic job with this. If you look at the restaurants and you look at some of the businesses coming into Cherry Hill, they're building on that and they're making it work and revitalizing. Another one is adaptive reuse. We have a lot of old buildings in these smaller downtowns. And what do you do with them? Do you knock them down? They have such great character. We talked about expanding the historic district, which I think is wonderful. But thinking about the building and thinking about proper use, there probably is a way. To think about how some of the older buildings here can be reused to help Main Street thrive. The one thing that Main Streets have over a mall, have over Amazon, is the experience. It's all about the experience. It's all about what people remember when they're shopping. They'll come in and out of your store, but they're going to remember the walk to the store. They're going to remember the planter that was there. And they're going to remember how pretty it was walking there. So something Main Streets, I think, you can build on is bringing that consumer experience and making it more than just your store. Make it the next store, make it the park, make it the community center. Point out the nipper dog sitting across the street. Do whatever you can to make them remember Morristown. And then finally, the other thing that we're seeing a lot in Main Streets is the small office market. And I can tell you, as you all know, Morristown knows how to do that. There's a lot of businesses and small offices here in Morristown, and that's fantastic. It serves your daytime population. It serves your daytime restaurants. But they also go home, right? So while it fills one need, it creates another problem too. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but I just wanted to highlight those 5 things that I'm seeing across the region as well as nationally about some things that Main Streets can do to build upon. I think the other thing, and I just want to go back to the vision of leaders, I think it's really important when you're thinking about what you want your Main Street to be and where you want it to go, is to create that vision. Are you all, the MBA may all be in agreement about what we want, or you want, Main Street to look like, but are you working with your community leaders? Do you have them on board? Do you all agree that that direction is right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a couple slides, but I do want to ask, can I just get by show of hands, how many of you are businesses in this room? Okay, and how many of you are with the community council, local government? Anyone in the room? Only one. Only one? Okay. I applaud you. Well, I think what I'm trying to say is the message here, I think, again, is for both. It's for businesses, it's for community leaders, it's for anyone in charge. It takes a team, it takes a village to make Main Street work. I just want to highlight a little bit too about what the retail mix should look like. I know the question that was asked of you today, what the question that you asked to write down about what you would like to see in Main Street. And Main Street is an art, but it's also a science. There is a science that goes behind this, as you all know. You have opened businesses here, and there's a reason you opened a business here. I don't know whether it was because of the building, the location, you thought people within a mile, there was enough to serve your market. But I want to highlight how the planning world, how we think about it. So there's 5 primary areas when it comes to retail. You have your primary retail uses that we're all familiar with. That includes goods and services, your food and restaurants, and everything else. You have civic and cultural uses. You have residential uses. You have vacancies. Vacancies is actually a use that we talk about, and you have residential. So those are the 5 key things that we see in Main Streets. So your neighborhood goods and services, I want to highlight. These are the things that you would think of that you would go, maybe a Saturday errand. You know, the bakery, not the bank necessarily. The bakery, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. No. Oh, I thought you were asking me something. I'm sorry. You know, tailors, spas, liquor stores, the places you need to go. Oh, I didn't know if it was me. I didn't realize. Okay. carry-outs, sandwich shops, ice cream shops, fast foods. And then GAFO is everything else. It's everything else that's not included in those two other categories, which tends to be the largest category. There's non-retail uses that happen in Main Street, and they happen for several reasons. One, you can't get a retailer to come into the space, so it's filled by someone with a yoga studio, massage parlor, a business. And those are okay, that is fine. You have a building that is now occupied, right? The key is to make that non-retail use be as active as that retail use. You want to make sure that you have zoning and regulations in place that put the same responsibilities that you would say on a restaurant that had outdoor seating as that business that just opened. Because there's nothing worse than not having activity for a certain number of blocks of your community. And I'm sure we can all walk outside and say, wow, this one's really busy, what's going on? And then you have 2 blocks of offices. Something to think about. I highlighted Edward Jones if you look at the presentation because they're notorious for wanting to settle in downtown locations because they think the foot traffic alone brings in business, right? So we all know, Amazon's taking over the retail world, which is a little true, but retail stores offer a fantastic marketing opportunity and business like Edward Jones understands that. Vacancies are awful. We all want to avoid vacancies. I don't know what the percent of vacancy is right now in Morristown. I'm sure it's probably pretty low. But I think ideally for Main Street and for an area, a downtown shopping center, you want to keep your vacancies under 20%. Once they reach about 20%, now you have a real problem. What are you doing with those empty storefronts? Think about, how do I keep that activity going? I think it was at my table, they were discussing what happens when you have a business that leaves and it remains empty for a few years, perhaps. Think about something like a program. I would build upon the art program that we were just talking about. Can you get local artists and put that stuff in the window for vacant stores? It just makes it look occupied, it makes it look like activity's happening, and it stops people from interesting. The other thing about vacancies, vacancy breeds more vacancy. You don't need for it to happen, but it happens, and it happens very quickly. And I would stress in any organization on Main Street, and this goes for local government too, who's in charge of the regulations, have a plan for when that vacancy happens. Be prepared for it, because it will happen. It just does. No one means for their business to close, but unfortunately it does. Culture and civic uses are wonderful, wonderful things for your downtown. You have it right here, it's built in, right? You already have foot traffic coming here. There's some car traffic too, but unfortunately they don't often contribute to the tax base, but that's not what we're searching for at Main Street. We're searching for people to come down here, shop, and experience downtown. Rule of thumb in terms of, I just want to mention anchors. I said they're great anchors for the community. If you have more than 30,000 square feet of retail, you need an anchor in your Main Street, your downtown. Do you know offhand how many square feet of retail you have there? No? It's interesting because if you want to move forward, you want to create a vision, and you want to measure how you're doing, you need to know what we currently have, right? Step one. But I bet if you did the analysis, you'd find you probably do have more than that. And the anchors here probably serve a large portion of the retail uses or the zoned retail uses here.
Karen, what's the definition of an anchor? Would that be a business, a park?
Could be anything. It could be a business. It could be a civic use. It could be a theater. It could be a park. Something that has a large draw by itself that is going to bring people here naturally. Your post office, your library, whatever. I mentioned residential, and I want to mention two things because single-family residential just happened naturally here in downtowns, and that's okay. That's okay. But it causes that break when I was talking about the activity. It causes a little bit of a break. I would encourage any downtown or Main Street, if you're going to do residential, to do mixed use. What we're striving for is a 24/7 environment, correct? When the daytime people leave, you want the nighttime people to come out, and the people who do that are the people who live here. who don't have to drive here necessarily, but people who actually live here. They're more invested. So the next slide, you can't see it up there. Back in 2013, 2014, me and my team did an analysis of 71 different suburban downtowns in our region. And we looked at everything, we walked the streets, and we made notes on every crack in the sidewalk and what the windows looked like and how wide the storefronts were. And that data, it was invaluable. But what I wanted to highlight here is the retail mix that we found in the downtowns. I mentioned Main Street. You classified yourself as a Main Street. And do you have national certification as a Main Street? No. Okay, so you're just calling yourself a Main Street. Okay. But Main Street, commercial corridor, CBD, central business, we all use them interchangeably, but they are very different types of places. They are very different typologies. When you characterize yourself as a Main Street, what you're saying is that this is a place where neighborhood people come to shop for goods and services. You're talking about a small neighborhood. When you talk about, say, a CBD, you're talking about a larger expanded area that not only has access to goods and services, but also is a tourist destination. So I want you to think a little bit about when you're calling yourself a Main Street, what you're actually saying about what this corridor actually is, and the name's escaping me right now. The street, and I drive it all the time. It's Kings Highway, isn't it?
Main Street.
Main Street.
Is it Main Street?
Trying to Kings Highway right at Perkinstown.
Camden County resident, I'm sorry, but I do drive it. But as a Main Street, you want to identify as a Main Street, the number one thing that you should have in your retail mix are neighborhood goods and services. It's the first and foremost thing the community should have. Because the first neighborhood you should be thinking about serving are the people who live within a mile. People who can walk here, the people who want to come here. Once you fill all your retail spaces with your neighborhood goods and services and someone has everything they need to do on a Saturday, then think about bringing in restaurants. Restaurants are great for your daytime population and your daytime business and your daytime offices, but at night, like I said, they go away. You need that vitality 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. But restaurants need a larger draw. They need to pull from more than a mile. They need to pull from 5 to 10 miles at a minimum. So you have to think about now you're thinking about competition, you're thinking about other downtowns. It's very convoluted, very easy. That is why I tell communities such as Morristown, focus on providing what your neighborhood needs immediate. If you can do that, you'll keep this street bustling. And then worry, and the rest will happen. So what we unfortunately did find is that a majority of the downtowns had GAFO uses. That means that they had everything but access to the goods and services that we talked about and restaurants, which is not necessarily a good thing because GAFO uses tend to need, again, a larger area. When I think of a GAFO use as a planner and as a professional, I think of Target. They're drawing from a very, very larger geographic area. It's not an appropriate use for a Main Street. It's not an appropriate use for a downtown. The analysis on Morristown, 27% of it's GAFO. So there's a gap there in what's being served to the local community. 25% was office, non-retail. And that's okay if it fills space. Make sure they're contributing to the vitality of the downtown and make sure that you're holding them to the same standard that you would a retail business. So in my remaining time, I'm going to go through 7 characteristics for successful downtowns. And the first one is management. And I think it's, I heard someone on the side. I think it's wonderful that this MBA exists. I think it's wonderful that you all realize that you're in this together and everything happens here affects each and every one of you equally because it does. But what we find the most successful downtowns have management such as, they're certified at National Main Streets where they have a Main Street coordinator, they have a retail coordinator, they have a bid, they have some organization outside of local government whose sole purpose is to make sure this street is vital and is working and remains that way. Unfortunately, we found only 12.5% of all the downtowns I looked at have a successful management system. And I will say that a majority of the downtowns that are national main streets were also bids. Everyone knows what a business improvement district is here. And I don't like to use that word necessarily because when people think of bid, they think of taxing, they think of more money. But as a business, you want your town and you want this downtown to be invested in, right? You want it to look good. You want those sidewalks swept and the snow gone and those plants out there every spring if we ever get it this year. But you want that to happen. But I'm not saying it's something that you should do. I'm saying that the ones who are most successful tend to be the ones that have diverse funding, which bid brings, as well as a management system outside of the local government. Invest in what happens on that main street. Another thing to do, if you're all familiar with Ardmore over in Lower Merion Township in Pennsylvania, this is a picture of the office. Sits right on Main Street. Sits right there. So when someone's walking by, they go in, they look in the window, what's this? Or floors, anything you could possibly need to know about the downtown is located. And it's a non-office use. I mean, it's an office use. But look, there's a bench, there's flowers, there's glass. It looks pretty, right? You stop because you don't know the difference. One of the things that I do want to talk about are the benefits of having a more managed downtown. It's sort of similar to a mall. And I know we all think we're in competition with the mall, but believe me, the mall is not your only competition. It's also the internet. Right? So you need to do whatever you can possibly do for someone to choose here over there. But the benefits a mall brings, they're all working together. And that's from, and that's about standards. It's about the standards they want for that mall. The downtown has standards, right? You want it to look a certain way. You want businesses to be open certain hours together, right? It's also the number one thing I hear from a lot of downtowns. They can't keep the businesses open. But being open is a good thing. But working together in terms of location strategies, I'm going to I would imagine there's no retail plan in Morristown for the downtown, where somebody has actually mapped out where each business is and thought about the location strategies of where they should be. Because there's the science in retail planning. The mall does it. They do a good job at it most times, right? They stick the food court right in the middle for a reason, But downtown should think about that too. You should think about your location strategies. And if you have an existing business and you have a vacancy down the street, there's no reason why a retail, say the retail coordinator for the town can say, I think you're going to get better business if you move to this location. Just an idea. But in terms of hours, operating hours, I mentioned standards for how it looks. Some things that you want to borrow from a mall would definitely help Main Street thrive. I just want to mention retail spaces, retail appropriate spaces for the downtown. And when I say retail appropriate, I'm talking about what a national retailer would look like. This slide, highlights what a national retailer is looking for. They want 14-foot height, 20-foot width, 45 to 90 feet deep, visible from inside and out, a clear entryway, and pedestrian accessibility. How many of those spaces do you have in downtown Worcester?
Yeah.
So, okay, that's off the table. What are we going to do to make those spaces we do have that a retailer would want to come in? So what ends up happening, you get a lot of retailers that aren't national chains. You get people opening their own businesses, and that's okay. That is perfect. But you need to understand what your community has to offer. And there's a reality to that. And it's a hard reality sometimes. Yes, if Starbucks wants to come to Morristown, we're going to make it work. Just like they did in Haddonfield, if you're all familiar with that. CVS wants to come here, they're going to make it work. And if you have design standards and you have sign standards, you keep them and you enforce them. They'll want to be here for a reason. But if you don't meet these standards, I want, as a community, as a group, think about the reality of who would open a business and who is right to open a business here in Morristown. I mentioned anchors needed for 30,000 square feet of retail. I'm showing, that's the library in downtown Haddon Heights, if you're all familiar with it. If anyone notices, I'm using pictures of classic towns. Has anyone noticed that? Morristown is a classic town program we run at DVRPC, but they're all downtowns, and you all have a lot in common and similar stories. So I mentioned the 30,000 square feet. Non-retail, I mentioned non-retail being office. Non-retail is good. I don't want to chase the offices away, but you definitely want to make it, that's my timer. Keep going, keep going. But you also want to make sure that it's contributing to the street, and I mentioned the National Retailer Standard of visibility of glass. I know a lot of communities that have put in, say, at least 25% of your frontage needs to be glass so people can see in and see out. Make sure that, again, they're held to those standards. And the picture I'm showing is just highlighting how you have a restaurant on the end of that row, and the rest of those businesses, there's nothing going on. Just something that you'd want to avoid. Is your downtown walkable? Sidewalks are the first and last thing that people shopping here are going to remember. Make it a memorable one. Some standards about sidewalks. At least 8 feet is the standard. I'm not sure what the width of the sidewalks here in Morristown are. I'm sure they differ in width. If you have restaurants, I would always encourage outdoor eating, outdoor dining, no matter what the width is. Again, that vitality that people are looking for. Safety. Perceived safety is about maintenance. Maintenance is huge in the downtown. I'm showing a cracked tree here, and yeah, it looks like something that's pretty small, and it kind of looks like a very sad-looking tree that doesn't need that great. That's like a vacancy. If you don't address that, it happens to the next one, and then it happens to the next one. And before you know it, now it looks like a downtown that no one's really investing in. That's not what you want your downtown to look at. So maintenance is key, and that sense of safety. And unfortunately, we think about lighting, we think about crime when it comes to safety. Yeah, that's the science of it. But perceived safety, people think of different things. If you drive down a street and say 9 o'clock at night and you don't see any restaurants open, no one's really on the street, I don't know about you, I'm thinking, wow, there's something going on here. Why? Why is no one out? What's going on? But these little things, very important to address. And those can be addressed if you have a management body in place to address those immediately. Relying on your local government for everything, they have a lot of work to do. They have many tasks, and I know that downtown is important to them, but I bet it's not the sole focus of the community development director. You know, he's got a lot on his plate. Parking is such an issue, and I know everyone's saying, oh, it's an issue here in downtown, and we don't have enough spaces. That may be true. But access to parking is important in whatever way, shape, or form that you provide it. If it's in back lots behind the stores, that's fantastic. Make sure that there's a safe way for people to get from that lot to your downtown. Make it interesting. Make sure it's well lit. It's the safety and the investment in downtown. And I want to highlight on-street parking, and I know Morristown has meters. And this is me speaking. I am a big believer that a downtown should do nothing to put themselves at online the mall has a competitive edge. So you should do everything you can do to make people want to shop here. And the number one, I think, is free parking. I would tell anybody, Diane's putting a thing up to her face. I believe this strongly because we get complaints, oh, it's the business owner parking in front of my store. Most times it probably isn't. All right, but the issue is, unless you have such high turnover that you need to charge for that parking, it should be free. Do whatever you can to make somebody want to come here. You know, I can't even tell you how many times I've been searching for a quarter in my wallet. I didn't have, so I just kept driving. Or the kiosks, not very convenient when you park at one end of the road and have to walk to the other. I know people think, I know, yes, it's a money generator, do it so people will violate the laws. But you need to figure out what the goal of the Main Street actually is to get people to shop here and come here, or is it just to charge them for parking and think that it's going to bring another rate in?
Personal experience, Collingswood, Bordentown. Bordentown's free parking, cars are there all day. Collingswood, they move. And that's what happens.
But my
Because
point
neither
is,
place has any parking anywhere else. So you're stuck with either cars all day long, or people will move and complain that there's no parking.
You have a valid point. If there's cars there all day, as a consumer, I'm thinking, wow, people don't want to come here. What's going on?
You never find a parking space in Bordentown.
I know, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
But again, what's your goal? Is it to provide ample parking for nothing, or to get people out of that car and to come here over Amazon and the mall? That's what all I'm trying to stress to you. What is the goal? You know, you can argue parking 17 different ways. It doesn't work for this person, it works for that person. As a professional who was asked to speak, I'm telling you, I think the goal of the Main Street should be to do anything you have to do to make someone want to come here over going somewhere else.
Well, Morristown does a better job,
I'm sorry.
because you have free parking for X number of minutes.
Yeah.
So they kind of do both worlds. If you're running in to get something and buy it,
That's
bang,
excellent.
you got it. And
That's
that's
excellent.
probably the best of two worlds.
It probably is. Excellent. So
12 minutes.
that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
It doesn't take long to buy all of it.
Yeah. I've been in downtowns where people were like having heart palpitations, you know.
Of course, but
I mean,
a lot of
it's just again, what I'm trying to do is get you to think a little bit about, you know, what the downtown can do and different strategies to make it successful. Sorry, I talked about meter parking. We're going to skip right over that. Does your downtown have a theme or a unifier? And this gets to branding and marketing. It's so important when you think about that memorable experience for a downtown, and I know that there's probably ones that are sticking out in your head. But it starts with your signage, and I'm sure Morristown has very strict sign guidelines in the downtown. Okay, that's good.
Well,
It can be good. Because, okay, would you want neon flashing signs in the downtown?
no, they just won't let you put up any signs.
Well, that's not helping you as a business.
Yeah.
But, I can't get into those details, but I think that signage is good. I think it needs to be regulated, but it provides you the opportunity to have a unifying appearance for your community. You know, if you look at the slides, I'm highlighting Quakertown. You want to visit Quakertown? They have some issues, but their downtown is coming back, and the one thing they do is make every store have the same size sign. So there's no advantage over one over another, which looks fantastic, and in the same way. And then obviously wayfinding. We're all familiar with what wayfinding is, showing people how to get around the downtown, where the businesses are, where the parking is. Also serves as a great unifier. I have this up here, limiting the sign to size. Downtown, obviously, there's some inappropriate signage regulations you would like to avoid. I always tell people that a neon sign flashing is not an appropriate use for your downtown. It's not good character. It's a distraction. And that's an appropriate use when people are driving over 45 miles per hour, but they're not. They're driving 25, right? Here. And that's supposed to be, and that's good. Transit options. Morristown does not have a train. I think people come here because they know of it and it's more of a destination. But transit does serve to help the downtown, whether it's a train station or bus traffic. I know people see it as a deterrent to traffic along the Main Street, but traffic is a good thing because if they're stopped, they're going to look up and see what's there. Oh, I didn't know that card shop was here. I'll just pull over here. So again, thinking about the goal of your Main Street, is it to get people through Morristown as quickly as they possibly can? Or is it to possibly make them stop a minute and look up and see what's here? Just thinking a little bit about that, and obviously you don't have a train station, but if you did, locating certain businesses and signs around the train station. Programs are so important to the downtown, and I know Morristown does a lot of that, and I was listening to the MBA's involvement, and it's fantastic. And again, programs, it's about bringing people here and highlighting your businesses. That's fantastic, right? You mentioned the art thing that you've been doing for 3 years. I think that's a wonderful thing. I would challenge you to take it to the next level. Make it a contest. Put it online. Take it outside Morristown. Have the art on the street throughout the year. give the artists a booth here at the next festival. I was so happy to hear that the businesses get first choice and priority at your downtown events. It's so important. How many downtown events have I been to where they bring in all these people from around the region and the businesses are not even represented and half of them aren't even open? It makes me happy to know that you guys are working together and know that it is important to do. The last point I want to talk about is your local government. Is it retail ready? When I say retail ready, do they have streamlined development processes? Do they have updated zoning, updated land use regulations? This stuff is so important. When I get to, again, the local government's job, they're coming from a different place than where the businesses on Main Street are coming in. That's why I think it's important to think about having a dedicated person whose sole responsibility is to bring in new business as well as retain the businesses that we have here. I serve on my planning board in my community. I live in Camden County, and we don't get anyone to our planning board meetings except one night we had a gentleman, no one knew who he was and whatnot. And I realized at the meeting, what we were talking about, you're arguing over development regulation, you're arguing over a setback. And it wasn't very professional. But in the end, you know what? I came to find out that it was a retail representative who was looking to feel out how the planning board actually communicated with each other. To see if it was a community he wanted to work with, to see how difficult it would be. And we missed out on an opportunity. When I say retail ready, I'm talking about making sure that if someone comes to Morristown and says, hey, you have this space I'm thinking of opening here, you can hand them a packet and say, this is everything you need to do, this is who you need to talk to, these are all the approvals. Very important. The other thing I want to mention is incentives. We all talk about, I know you've talked about incentives, what can we do? Can we get tax write-offs to develop in the downtown? And I always argue, everyone does incentives, so only provide them if you absolutely need a project to get off the ground. And in a community, I would also argue that provide incentives for a certain area. If you want business to come to downtown, provide incentives for locating here. Don't provide incentives for locating on Route 38 or Route 73. But again, it takes us back to that vision and that goal. What does the community want Main Street to be? And I mentioned positive investment climate. So important to a national retailer or anybody wanting to open a business in your community. Even if it is someone who's opening their own business, they want to be in an area that's pleasant and easy, and the people who are easy to work with, and regulations that make some sense. So again, something just to think about. I've gone over my time. I've touched on as much as I possibly can. So I'm going to stop talking and take some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone facilitate with the table?
Sure. So,
And computer.
Okay, well, a couple of things. I first of all, was fortunate to grow up in an awesome downtown, Doylestown, Pennsylvania, which has figured it out. It is become one of the most popular destinations and outdoing New Hope and all that stuff. So I digress. But one of the things you mentioned Mercer County. Mercer County has an incredible park system, and they market that because we also have some of the majority of the hotels in the area. In Burlington County, the highest hotel population here. So I think that we need to somehow package our recreation resources so that we can attract lacrosse tournaments and the hockey tournaments and soccer tournaments. And that if we partnered with Burlington County, all of the schools, our turf fields that we have in other communities, created a recreation map that we could market to these different clubs so that they would host tournaments here, and then at the same time have maps prepared. So if they're playing at our high school and things like that, I know it's done at a small level, but really take that to a different level, that we package the whole region. I think it would bring in new bodies to help support our restaurants other than, the ones that we also have here. And one other thought is, one thing that Morristown has done well is they have expanded their bike paths. So I live on the east side of town, we now have bike paths to get into town. So we need to promote those bike paths in order to get people downtown so we can have, pedal for pizza, pedal for pasta, get people to come in from the outskirts without a car, make it more of a family event, and support our restaurants. So,
Are you volunteering to be idea person only? Do I have time to respond? Okay, so two thoughts. I think you're right. But again, my initial thought is you're thinking larger than just this corridor, right? There are people in South Jersey that I think you should talk to if this is really your idea. Devin Perry, who runs the South Jersey Tourism, is the destination marketing organization for this region. I think she would love your idea. She loves, and they're really starting to get into non-motorized transportation alternatives for the region. I think that's fantastic. I think that one of the assets of Morristown is your park system. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it goes unseen. But I would also challenge you to think about how do you connect those parks to downtown? Is it bike paths? Is that wayfinding for the bike paths? What more can you do to make that connection? I think would be a wonderful addition to Morristown. And the second thing you mentioned, I can't remember.
The pedal for the...
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Bring attention.
Yeah, fantastic idea. I love it. Yeah.
And we need to get more of our businesses to partner with other businesses that are complementary. So, to encourage, have coupons to, Navy Blue, hey, you had dinner at Maurizio's, come down and shop and, get 10% off or something.
That's a great idea.
I just want to say quickly, I think that all the council members should be here at this meeting today, and I do applaud the one council member that is here today.
I'm not trying to single out local government versus business. I think that what everyone needs to remember, if it's going to be successful, it takes both.
Yes, absolutely.
And that was my point.
And the reason that Stephen so kindly invested in video documenting today's presentation is so that Karen's presentation can have a farther reach beyond this room. So hopefully the presentation will be viewed by more people.
I'm on film.
Yes.
How do you address the issue when you have 2 or 3 owners of most of the property on Main Street? Rent is high, maintenance of the buildings is low to non-existent. So you find a business, you want to bring them in, but there's no way they're going to make a living in somebody else's building at their rates.
Sure. Lease rates are an important factor when it comes to Main Street. What I would say is, moving forward, this is where I think a plan is very important, that you discuss this and have something in place when that happens. If someone owns a building or they want to buy in the future, make sure you tell them, you can own this, but you need to keep the lease rate here, and you need to do this. Because he already,
I don't think you can do that.
well, you can keep guidelines. Yeah, sure can. Look, you're the downtown, you can do whatever you want. He's either going to come here or he's not. He's going to buy here or he's not. Right? If he wants to be here, he will adhere to your rules. If he's not invested in the community, he'll go somewhere else. And then did you want him? Right?
But you can't do that retroactively.
No, you cannot do it retroactively. So I guess unfortunately my answer is you're gonna have to hound him. Okay?
The current people you have.
Yeah.
And we can change things for the future.
Yes, you should start today, moving forward,
Yeah.
putting those guidelines in place. But who's already here, you kind of have to just deal with that and hope that if he sees it happening for other places and them being successful, maybe he'll come around on his own.
Would that be a township ordinance?
Yeah, you need to have something on the town.
Karen, I know we're running out of time. I have a question I have to ask. I'm hesitant to ask, but I need to know from your
I'm not telling you
perspective.
how old I am.
You're 25, you've accomplished a lot since you've been.
I'll be back.
When, as the president of the MBA, we're all between we have a spot on the Economic Development Advisory Council. And Chris Chiacchia, who was the chair last year, we went over how do you feel because they do some really good things in some areas. And we met with, was it Marnie? I would figure Marnie, or Remy.
Remy.
Remy and
Yes.
gentleman at the time that was the mayor. And we sat down, and when we left, I know Chris had said to me, we're so far behind as a community, they have all the things in process, really well done in certain areas. Yet when we came back to town, it was like, don't bring it up. We don't want to do that in a town. I'm trying to understand the way my pragmatic brain works. What's the benefit of the hands-off approach that Morristown seems to have where anything goes? And I can't figure out where we benefit or who benefits from
I'm going
that.
to turn that question on all of you. Are you benefiting from that approach?
No.
Well, a few individuals are, the building owners are.
Building owners are.
Yeah.
They are not invested in this community. I bet they're absentee owners, are they?
There's some of them involved, but it's, the challenge is, I mean, from as a business owner,
Yeah.
if you allow anyone to come in your building, it's easier to get higher rents, which goes towards higher prices on your building if you have an office in there relative to an eclectic mix of shops.
Sure.
So I'm trying to think, is there any other person besides the building owners that benefit by doing this? Because I don't see it right
Probably
now.
not. Probably not.
And it's not, the communities that look like they really have done it well seem to be much more active.
Well, let's,
now.
yeah, we
Is
can-
that accurate or not?
Yeah, well, let's talk about Haddonfield. Because if you've lived here for more than 10, 15 years, you saw Collingswood started eating their lunch.
Yep.
And there was vacancy after vacancy. They needed to do something. Now, they had a retail coordinator in there before Rennie. Her name is Lisa. Her last name is Karen. I believe she's with the South Jersey Chamber now. But she saw it happening. There was cheaper leases. And you know what? Mayor Malley, if you're familiar with him in Collingswood, he could sell anything to anybody to come into their community. And that's what I talk about leadership. You have leadership and a vision, anything can happen.
You brought Perkins to Collingswood.
Yes,
Yeah.
but what ended up happening, they saw what was happening. This quaint little downtown was losing out to this one because the number one thing was the leases. And the leases still remain high there, but they have put things in place. They made sure they have ready. Ready's sole purpose is to keep those those retail spaces occupied, right? Let her be the focus of that. Let local government be the government.
They seem to be doing more of what you just shared with us
Yes, they
today.
are.
And I love Collingswood because
Yeah.
it's so eclectic. And, you know, been to Chestnut Hill, and I even look at other towns, even in, was it Clemson, Pittman, and
It's interesting because there's not a one-size-fits-all for every community.
Exactly.
I'm talking about characteristics that I need you to think about, and then how can they be applied to Morristown? But what works in Haddonfield may not necessarily work here. It's a different demographic, right? So when you think about Morristown, I mean, this is a pretty affluent area. You have a lot of people who live here with discretionary dollars. So what is happening? What is the story behind why they're not spending it on Main Street? What is the missing piece, right? What are you not providing? Yeah.
Okay. Before we're out of time, I listened to everything that you said, and makes a lot of sense all over, across the board. But one thing that you said that I thought was pretty cool was just like the art placement for where the businesses should go. And not that I'm volunteering, having a schematic of what businesses are here, where they're located, really, you know, it's kind of like we're too close to the forest to see the trees currently. So if you have that on paper, you can kind of look at it and say, you know, this would be good here, or this kind of, and we're all out there, we're business owners, we're talking to people every day. And so we might hear somebody that wants to open up a business, and we can, you know, yeah, that would be nice here.
That'd be a great location,
So,
wouldn't it?
that,
Yeah.
and you don't want to have, and you said this before, Steve, you know, it's great, we all like pizzerias, but we don't want to have 10 pizzerias. We're not
Sure.
here.
I just want to add, one of the most important things about a downtown is to track your success. You can't track success if you're not measuring. And if you're not measuring, you don't have a vision and a goal in place. So really, you need to start here. You know, get what you have and put it on paper, because it looks so different on paper from when you look at it visually. You know, I know when I did the analysis of the retail districts, you know, I live close to Haddonfield, and I drive down that corridor all the time, and I'm like, oh, I never noticed this was actually empty. There's 2 storefronts here. You know what I'm saying? You need to understand where you're starting from so you know where you want to go. And as part of that, it's understanding what the retail mix looks like today, and what do you need to put in place at the local government level to make that happen? Enforcement is a huge thing. Enforcement in the guidelines and building standards is a very large part of making Main Street successful. Is it, moving forward, you want to make sure every use provides a certain amount of glass? You want to make sure every dining establishment has outdoor seating? You want to make sure there's a park bench every 100 feet? Things to think about. But again, it takes two. It takes you guys and it takes people in charge to understand this. Yeah, I'm sorry. I told you I was talking about it. I'm sorry.
No, it's like I could listen to you all day.
Are we good?
We good? All right, so now we get a round of